When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back. This is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode, working title, My SEO Checklist. So I've been going through a bunch of different sites recently. I recently just launched a client site. We actually kind of started it and finished it and launched it. So it was a bit of a crazy time. And of course, this is a content site. So there's a large amount of SEO preparation and checking things before launch, checking things during. And so I thought I would bring the SEO checklist that I use to the table and kind of share it with you guys. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, but join us in our Discord server or share this with your friends. And remember, you can get up to 20% off of Scrimba using our link. Go check it out. It's for new accounts. Details will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. So this checklist I've kind of broken down into separate sections. I'm basically going to kind of go through some of the stuff. A lot of it's technical SEO. Some of it's going to be touching on or just straight up be like telling your client, hey, kind of don't do that, do this, or forcing them to do things programmatically. And we'll get into that. Now, this might not be all encompassing. Again, this is largely what I use personally. I'm not the SEO aficionado of everything. Some people may disagree with some of this stuff totally, and I totally get that, especially with SEO stuff. Like, I'm always down to try new things. So if you're like, hey, I don't like that you have that character count, I don't like that, please reach out. Let me know. I'm on X. You can come and talk to me, DM me, whatever, and say, hey, Matt, I don't like this, I don't like that. Hey, I think you should try this. And I'm totally down and open for that. But I have seen success using this checklist on real world sites that are really they are actually selling ads and doing the content game thing. So this isn't just from nothing. This does work, at least under what I've seen. So with all that out of the way, I want to start with the basics. And the basics are what I call the SEO title, the SEO description, and the OG or the open graph image. Now, this is something that you might be like, well, that's obvious, that's easy. I don't think it is. Now, when I say that, all of these concepts are very easy. Typing in a title, typing in a description, typing in an OG image. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see from people that are trying to SEO a site is they're haphazardly going through and adding these SEO things onto their site. And they don't have sort of a stringent system in place. They don't have a checklist in place, and they leave things undone. So you'll go to their about page and there just won't be an open graph image, or they won't have a title, or they won't have a description set, things like that. And to me, with SEO, it's all about being very consistent, having systems in place, making sure that you look professional or as professional as possible on every page. Now, this might sound a bit neurotic, and you're like, Matt, if you forget to put a title or a description on your About Us page, it's not going to be the end of the world. You're correct. However, I don't want, if this site scales up, I don't want there to be potentially hundreds of pages where there's missing things. So I'll go through each of these things. Now, an SEO title, that's just the title tag. So, recommended, or it's usually recommended by SEO experts to be between 50 and 60 characters in length. If you go onto Google, onto the SERP, which is the search engine results page, it's the text that's used on the blue link. That's the title. Very simple. SEO description is what I call the meta description, or what I call the meta description. Basically, it's just a meta tag. It's in HTML. It's a meta with the name attribute set to description, and then the content attribute set to whatever is your actual description. And that content should be a recommended between 150 and 160 characters in length. Now, some people listening to this right now might be like, hey, my SEO expert, or hey, I'm an SEO expert and I prefer a longer description, or my SEO guy prefers a longer description. And this is largely to accommodate Google snippets. And sometimes people will recommend things like 180 to 220 characters. I had a guy one time recommend and swore by 380, I believe, characters. A lot of this stuff is going to be up to your SEO strategy. Feel free to kind of go around and like experiment here and there. But again, like make sure you have this stuff set on each and every one of your pages, because even if you make sure things are set and this and that, there's going to be mistakes, or maybe you are going to miss a page here and there. But if you're really strict with making sure this stuff is set, at the very least, the majority, hopefully all of your pages look professional. That to me is actually a really big part of SEO. And it leads perfectly into the OG image. Like the OG image feels like it's something that's of an afterthought, right? So an OG image is an Open Graph image, and it is the image that appears when your link is shared on other platforms if they support Open Graph. So think about the cards on Twitter/X. When you share a link, it'll like make a little card up where it'll put the title in there. It'll make the card have the little image, things like that. Think the link previews on Facebook, where you share a link and then it makes that little square or rectangle, whatever, and it has, again, like your set Open Graph image, your title, sometimes your description as well. Think that stuff. And just think about how professional that looks when you and or your marketing department has decided to create a set of Open Graph images that are for each of your blog posts, your About Us page, your home page, things like that. And it's all just, it's all nice and tidy. And like, this isn't going to be set in stone. Like, go around and, change the OG image for holiday time, or, to experiment with different character counts and things like that. But to me, like, looking professional is actually like a big part of SEO, making sure that everything is just sort of nice and in their place, and you're generally following the rules, but don't be afraid to like kind of experiment with some things. Now, do take caution, of course, because if you really experiment, you could absolutely tank somebody's traffic. But again, just like make sure that all of these things are really present. Now, an OG image, the dimensions should be 1200 pixels by 630 pixels. Actually, this is a range. So down to the minimum size of 600 pixels by 315 pixels. And this is an aspect ratio of 1.91 to 1. All these numbers will be in the show notes. I'm just kind of throwing numbers at you right now, but all these numbers will be in the show notes. You can go and check those out right there for your own notes. The size of the image, I like to keep mine really small. So a lot of people will say, below 5 megabytes is, pretty good. I personally try to keep my images below 1 megabyte. Like, why take up additional storage space and hosting space, especially when I'm going to have an Open Graph image on each of my pages. And if I'm a content site, I might have 1,000 blog posts. That's 1,000 images. I'd rather have things be small and still look decent. So I'm a fan of really compressing these images. You can use different formats, of course. You can use a PNG, you can use a JPEG. I use WebP. Some people say that they shouldn't do this because not all platforms may support this. However, WebP support's really good these days. And for me, for Open Graph image, I look at the platforms that I care when it's shared on. If I really want my link shared on Discord and my little card that is generated looks really nice, then we're good. If I want it on Facebook, my card looks nice, then we're good. And that leads me into my next point, which is going to be platform consideration. So if your links are shared on specific platforms a lot, you can take them into special consideration. So the dimensions, the size, the format, things I just mentioned are really kind of generic advice and general advice. But if you have something a specific platform that you really want to look a certain way, and you're like, let's say you're huge on marketing on X and you really want things to look a certain way, you can absolutely have some variance on your Open Graph image. You can mess with different meta tags that'll be like Open Graph specific for Twitter, for example, to generate the card a certain way. Maybe the image will be a different dimension, things like that. So if you want to, you can really tailor some of these experiences. And if you look them up, so for example, if you look up specific Open Graph tags that pertain to X or Twitter, they will have a set of them. And you can choose like, oh yeah, I'd like to set that different image. Oh, I'd like to set that title. Oh, their image supports this higher resolution. Let's do that. Things like that. And so you can get really kind of into the nitty gritty. However, again, with this stuff specifically, you know, having your title, having your description, having your OG image set, to me, it's like at the very least, have all three of those set in the generic sense. So that way, everything's kind of present and looks nice and you're presenting yourself well. I have some specific notes that I do when I make pages for people, when I make sites for people. And this is going to be a common trend that comes up here and there. It's probably come up in this show a few times, not specifically this episode, but in this podcast. And that is that I like to use the CMS and I like to force people to do the right thing in the CMS. So what do I mean by that? I recommend if your site has a CMS, you make these three fields like period. You make these three fields, you make them required and as soon as possible. So you have an SEO title field, you have an SEO description field, and you have an OG image field. And I consider that like non-negotiable. If it's possible, you should do that. And then you and your clients will then be forced to fill in these things properly. So I set limitations on these things. I go in and I say the title field must be between 50 and 60, or maybe just a maximum of 60, whatever the specific parameters for my current SEO strategy are. The description needs to be below 220, or maybe it needs to be between 150 and 160 characters in length. The SEO image must be of a certain size so that it can't be too big, it can't be too small. It needs to be of a certain resolution, maybe, things like that. Now, if you're a person that's making websites for clients, they might call you and say, you know, it's really challenging for me to hit these parameters. Yeah, but it's going to be really challenging when the SEO doesn't look too good. Like, how professional and like good looking is it going to be if your client gets used to these character counts and these image restrictions and things along those lines? Like, to me, it's like at the end of the day, if the client just kind of toughs it out, goes through the procedure, and then they get, you know, 100 pages, 100 blog posts into their content site, plus all the regular static pages like homepage, about us, and things. So let's say it's 110 pages in, and they're 110 pages in, and they got a nice looking title, they got nice looking descriptions, they got OG images everywhere. Like, how nice does that look? How professional does that look, especially for sharing, but also presenting it to Google? It's showing like, hey, this is a professionally made site. And I know that obviously Google is not a person. And you might be like, Matt, you know, this is crazy. Like, why do you want this thing to look professional? My kind of mantra with this stuff is I never want a part of my site to have an excuse. Like, if Mike comes to me, he's a prospective customer. And let's say, Mike, you come to me and you say, hey, you know, I want to see your other work. And I share with you like 6 links. And, you know, the fourth link in the list doesn't generate a link preview or generates one that's messed up. I don't want to have to make an excuse for that. I don't want to have to come to you and say, well, don't worry, like, you know, my client's still writing that link or description. No, like, it should be, these 3 things should be in the CMS. They should be required fields and they should have parameters set around them. That's my strategy. And of course, those walls can break down if a client is adamant that they really don't want to do this. But I've seen websites have great success that I've published when I say, no, we're setting the parameters, we're making the system, and we're doing it. And it starts with these simple things, the title, description, and the image. Now, I do want to say something here. Keep in mind that Google can and will change the SEO titles and the SEO descriptions if they feel like they have a better one available. So things like blatant keyword stuffing, or adding additional keywords to the description and title that they want to hit, but they don't appear on the page, like they're not in the blog post at all. These are things that can contribute greatly to Google saying, I'm going to replace that title. I'm going to replace that description. When I see that, I do keep an eye out for it, and I do talk to my clients. Now, I don't necessarily think that we need to rip out all the titles and descriptions, because maybe they wrote those in a specific way where when they share on Facebook, it's going to be for a marketing campaign or something like that. So sometimes you don't care if Google replaces your title and your description. There's going to be little context like that, but it is something that I will go to my client and say, hey man, I don't know if you should be doing it like that. Like, I think that's a bit of keyword stuffing.
This is one of those topics where I actually said to Matt right before we started the episode, I'm like, I don't have too much to talk about on the SEO side, But I bet once you start talking, stuff will fire in my brain and I'll be like, oh yeah, this actually has a ton of problems with it. And that's exactly what happened in this case. I realized that SEO image, like the OG images, is actually a huge pain point of any developer. So putting out something really quickly out there, everything works fine, and all of a sudden the marketing guy comes back to you and be like, well, we need these images to look better, or we need these images to show up in these places. And this is where stuff starts to unravel when trying to create really complex websites, I think. For example, imagine a site, I guess similar to Twitter, maybe similar to something where you have a profile, right? And you want to be able to share that profile across different websites, right? You want that profile. And when you share that profile, you want it to have the right title, and the title would probably be your name. You want it to have the right description, maybe something like a little description, the same thing that you wrote on the profile of the site. And then also maybe you want to also share an image that is personalized to that person. Well, that becomes complicated because to most websites, well, not to most, but to some like Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, you can't send them a image in the share API. Like you can't just send them like a raw image. You have to send them a hosted image, so a link to an image, which means that every single profile that gets created needs to have a generated OG image created for them and stored somewhere on the server. And so when it gets hit, you're able to then send a link to that image and then everything should render okay, right? So this becomes a little bit complicated because now you're programmatically generating OG images on larger web applications. This is in itself not super difficult, but also not easy. Like you have to essentially create the image on a canvas, transfer that canvas to convert that canvas to a PNG, and then upload that PNG to a bucket of some sort or to Cloudinary, whatever image hosting service you have, and then store the URL for that PNG somewhere in your database associated with that user so that when it gets queried, so that that page can be built out dynamically with that image URL. Step by step, not too bad. Each step does have like a bunch of caveats in it, but regardless, that part of it is doable. What becomes even more complicated is like, do you do that on every hit? So every time someone were to share that image or share that page or go to that page, do you create that image again? Well, that could severely hit your servers. Like I've made this mistake where I did that. I didn't cache correctly. And all of a sudden our image hosting solution, Cloudinary, was costing ridiculous amounts of money. Like the percentage of usage was up so high that we had to like upgrade our plan 4 times just to keep up with the demand. We went back, looked at it, we forgot to cache. So that was pretty easily solved by just caching, making sure that the first time someone hits that page or shares that page, the image is generated. And then every time after that, it'll just hit the cached generated image where we store that URL. So it's not too difficult to get around, but there's so many little caveats with OG images that make this not a simple task to implement. My suggestion for this would be if you're making a simple blog site, if you're making something simple, keep the OG images as simple as possible, as repeatable as possible. Don't screw around with automatic OG image generation because that adds such a higher level of complexity that it's just like a lot of the time it's not worth it, because at the end of the day, it's great for like shareability, but it doesn't actually impact SEO. Like if the image was always just going to be a cover image of your site or something like that, the SEO engines wouldn't care. It would be like the people actually going and trying to link. The clickability, the click-through rates on that image might not be as high as a custom image that's generated for that user. But the automated technical SEO aspect doesn't care too much. So do it in phases, get an OG image out there. I think it's really important, but don't get too in the weeds with this automatic OG image generation too early on in the process, because it can really bog you down. Like this was like several cycles of a development team's work just to get it going. Now it's working great, which is awesome, but definitely not super simple. The other kind of complicated part is that and I think Matt, you mentioned this a little bit, but every single platform has a different size of OG image that they need. And so sometimes you're not generating one OG image, you're generating 5 OG images, or you're creating 5 OG images if you're doing it manually, which is also kind of a pain if you want it to look exactly the way you need it to look, right? on different platforms. That's something you have to do. Something that can help you with that, and we've actually had the host of this, the creator of this app on our website or on our podcast, Killian Valkoff from Polypane. Polypane is the tool that essentially allows you to do a lot of responsive design stuff in web development, like see all of the different layouts of your application all on the same screen really, really easily, which is really cool. But it also allows you to see all the different OG images generated for that site as well. So it's an easy OG image checker tool. There's plenty of other ones online you can check out. I just found this one to be particularly good and accurate to use. And just a random suggestion there for helping you debug little visual issues with your OG images and OG meta tags too, actually. The other and last thing that I want to talk about on the OG image side is some platforms have really strict caching policies on OG images. So let's say you upload an OG image and someone hits your site from that platform. Them, like us, like I was talking about before, they cache that image, but they cache it with a very aggressive caching header in the sense that like they won't update that image for potentially 24, 48, sometimes even longer amount of hours. And so if you were to make a mistake and put the wrong OG image and someone already hit your website or shared your website on that platform, they've already cached that image. So when you go to update and you check to see if it works, you'll notice the old image still being displayed. You'll panic. The reality is there's not much you can do. There used to be a way on X to purge the cache. They've removed that long ago. So now you just kind of have to twiddle your thumbs and hope that it eventually gets updated. So just a bunch of caveats on the OG image side, because that's the stuff that I've had the biggest pain with. Hopefully you won't have as much of a pain, but yeah.
Well, I want to add something to that is like for me, again, I said like I've been dealing with a lot of content sites, and I actually in the CMS, I force the user to set OG images. And that's one of the reasons is because I want them to like really think about like, okay, like, this is a content site. It's going to rely on not only SEO, but it's also going to rely on social media marketing. And I want them to choose like the correct image. I don't want to just automatically generate. Now, obviously automatically generating things are OG images is great, especially if a site's been out for a while and it doesn't have them, or if a specific decision doesn't necessarily need to be made. But in our case, like with my clients, it's like, hey, you got to figure out what image you want here, because like I'll go in and choose a stock image. You go look at it, you hate it, don't like it at all for whatever reason. And it's like, you like the golf, like if it's a golf website, it's like you like the golf course OG image to look like this. I just, put a golf ball there next to a tee, and you're like, that's the worst thing. Some people get really into it. So no, if it's a content site and you're kind of close to the content, that's up to you. Also, Mike, you made a good point about the various platforms, which I also talked about, where it's like, different sizes, different titles and things, and all kinds of different options for the various platforms. You can, what's great about a lot of this is I'll usually upload like a 720p image, or I'll upload the maximum size, like a 1200 by 630 pixel image. And I don't adhere to the various platforms. I make my OG images so that if there's any text in them, it's kind of centered, or at the very least has padding around it, so that if the various platforms pull the image, because it will still, like, for example, Twitter will pull like a quote unquote generic OG image, then it'll sometimes have to crop and kind of do its own thing. Like Twitter will do its own thing. Facebook will do its own thing. At the very least, I'm like trying to make sure that things aren't cut off as much. And so like you'll get better at making things that are generic, or like if you're taking like a picture of like landscape as your OG image, still looks good for a lot of pages, especially if you're talking about like a golf course or things like that. But then if it gets cropped a little bit, like a landscape can be cropped normally, it's not too crazy, and things like that. So like, don't be afraid and be like, oh no, like I have like 1,000 pages and I just have all these generic OG images. Like, yeah, like if you really want to do something specific for a platform, absolutely go and do that. But if you just want the images to appear, just go and take a look at what it looks like on those images. Because like having a generic OG image will oftentimes get pulled by the various platforms. I actually have a tool that I use for this. It's a opengraph.xyz. I use it all the time. It shows you what it'll look like on various platforms. It's also what I use to like quickly check things and be like, oh shoot, like we did forget to set an OG image on this particular thing. Or, oh, like this description, now that I've seen it as like a preview on Discord, kind of looks bad. I don't like that. Let's change the description. Let's change the title, things like that. So again, opengraph.xyz. I'll include a link to it in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. The next thing I look at, and this is going to be controversial. You're going to get some eye rolls. You're going to get some people with pitchforks at the gate. Performance. Okay. I've had this problem last year, 2024, with a client, with people that he has hired. It not good. So performance is a part of SEO. Yes. I'm going to get into it. So super heavy pages, meaning that they take forever to load, can cause people to think that a page is not working because of that long load time, and then they may skip visiting the site. They may bounce away. They say, the heck with this, I am leaving. Now, if somebody leaves even before they're logged by the analytics software as a bounce, or if they're not actually going to the page and they're not reading the content because they think the page is not loading, and then by that association, let's say they don't read the article, so now they're not sharing it, right? This is bad. This can contribute to lost traffic, high bounce rate, lost backlinks because people don't link to it anymore, right? They're not like, hey, check this out. I saw this cool article on their Facebook pages, things like that. And also, if the page is super heavy, it takes a long time to load, it can absolutely fall below competitors on the SERPs, on like, say, the Google search engine results page, if they have faster loading time. Absolutely, this can happen. Okay. Now, this is often due, in my experience, to asset sizes. Generally, it's images and videos. Very often images, because many people will just embed YouTube videos and things of that nature, so the video is not hosted on the website itself. But people will, they'll use really inefficient formats, like they won't want to use WebP. They'll use like massive PNGs. They don't want to use AVIF. They just want to use these like huge images that are not compressed, right? People aren't resizing images. So let's say they're uploading like this massive PNG that's like 2-3 megabytes, and it's a 1080p image. And on the site, like they're leaving it to the browser and like say the site template or the CSS, whatever, to resize it to a little spot on the site that's 300 pixels wide. This is wasting space, like storage space. This is wasting a massive amount of space. Like, cut that, like crop that thing down or resize it down. Get rid of those pixels. You don't need it. Make it WebP, compress it if you can, things like that. Like, try to save space. And a good way that I always think about it, and I mentioned this with the OG image, is I always think of this as, if this site scales, we're going to have a heck of a lot of images. We're going to have a heck of a lot of videos. And if you're like, well, it's only 10% or 20% too large. Well, 20% of a terabyte's 200 gigabytes. So that's a lot. And it's not crazy if you're a true, absolutely massive content site. Your website's going to be hundreds of gigabytes. Many websites are under a gigabyte. Many are under 10 gigabytes, 15 gigabytes, 30 gigabytes, 100%. Websites are generally small. But if you are a person you're making content, like you're trying to hit all these keywords. Maybe you're a news site and you're posting 10, 15, 20 times a day. If you are not respecting the amount of storage space that you are using, it can very easily get out of control. And this becomes a huge hosting bill. This becomes a huge problem because of the bounce rates and things like that. If the page is just taking forever, because for some reason the background image is a 4K image, even though it's Gaussian blurred, it's like, whatever, it's just a 4K image. It's going to take like 2-3 minutes on fiber to load. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but still. So load time absolutely works. Now, I said this is partially controversial. The reason why I say this is controversial is this year, I've had arguments, I've had debates, I've literally had email fights and everything on people that are trying to pinpoint or blame site performance over other things in SEO that make more difference. Like in this particular case, I've had people where it's like certain keywords are not being targeted. I'm trying to like anonymize details. I don't want to give away customer details, but it's like people aren't respecting keywords. They're not looking up. They're not like writing their articles, quote unquote, properly for SEO. They don't care about keywords. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. They're just making a website. And they're worried that, a page is taking 0.3 seconds instead of 0.2 seconds to load or something like that. I'm sorry to say this. That's not your problem. Like the page performance absolutely matters. Page performance absolutely matters. This is my personal opinion. Page performance SEO penalty is not as dramatic as some think. Some SEO experts think that having an absolutely perfect page speed insight score will solve a lot of SEO problems. I'm going to be honest, and this is just from experience, I think that that is simply just not the case. I do think that very slow load times should be fixed, as they will suffer SEO penalties because it's almost like the page is broken in a way. Like you uploading, again, like a 4K image when you should have something that's like at most 720p or something for the background, uncompressed, full-size PNG, full-size, enter in image format here. Yeah, at that point, it's almost like you've uploaded something that's like quote unquote broken on the page. Like this page is taking 5 seconds to load. This page is broken, right? So I think you should fix issues like that, right? Absolutely, I think you should fix issues like that. But I think that people, they get stuck on this technical SEO train where they think, oh my God, like, my performance isn't good. Web developer, like, help me. And it's like, maybe they're using a platform where the performance is hard to get. Like they're using a no-code platform where getting things up to 100 on PageSpeed Insights is going to be really challenging. Let's say they're already in the 70s, like they got 70. It's like, okay, to me, if you have other issues like keyword problems, you're missing random metadata, your link structure is all over the place, and we'll talk about some of these things later. Your link structure is all over the place. I think we put down the performance. We got it to 70. We got it to 65. We got it into the yellow or the orange tier on mobile and at the very least on desktop on Google PageSpeed Insights. Is this something we should maybe return to? Yeah, I agree. It's not, I don't think that us going from 65 to 90, which might take a lot of effort, a lot of experimenting, and a lot of time, I don't think it's going to help you. And I think it's a waste of time. And I know that that's going to be controversial because I've had arguments with people on the phone where they're like, getting this page speed up is going to save everything. I'm like, no, it's not. Because we didn't see, I've had issues with people where they've been in the red on PageSpeed Insights, which I don't like. So I'll go and I'll fix it up and we'll go from like an 18 to like, a 65. That's something that you should fix. Like there's going to be some broken things, as I said, like, images that are way too big and things are kind of out of control and you got to go in and do a cleanup. Totally agree. Once you get it to the point where in the real world, people can load the site, in my opinion, the performance is no longer a problem. We can nitpick it and we can go in and we can perfect it and polish it. But if you've got a list of SEO problems, I don't think you should work on it anymore. I don't think the 65 matters. To be honest, I don't even know what the HTML of the things website performance is. It's probably bad because I just threw it together. I've even left some like auto-generated classes because it's a content site that we've done. Like, it's like, let's go throw it together. Like, let's get this thing up and running. And every time we do an SEO centric article, our traffic goes up. Our traffic's doing good. And in my opinion, I don't think that increasing the load speed is, as long as it's not crazy, decreasing the load time, I guess, making it so the page loads faster is what I'm trying to say. Making something load faster by 0.1 seconds is not that big of a deal to me. This is controversial. I don't know if you have anything to ask or like add to that, Mike, or anything to say, but it's like, this is something where legitimately I've had like 10 meetings in 2024 where people are like, you got to fix this. And I'm like, it's not broken. Like we have other massive issues we need to get to first.
I've had this exact same argument as you've had. The problem lies in people's instinct to always lay blame on things that aren't under their control. So they can be like, well, the site sucks, so I don't take that ownership of the issues. So I was working on an e-commerce platform. I came in like wait, obviously I didn't build it. I just came in to help them actually maintain it. But at the end of the day, all marketing was doing was saying, hey, here's a bunch of studies that show that if you have an e-commerce like platform that has a checkout loading experience of greater than 7 seconds, you're losing 50% of traffic, or you're losing people 50% of the time, which means, and then they would just put this into plain words, we're losing 50% of sales. So here's millions of dollars. The reality is, I think there is a certain correlation. If your site is significantly slower, especially on products that are more, let's say, like off the cuff purchases where you wouldn't need to purchase them every day, where it's something that you're just wanting and you're purchasing. So maybe for some smaller products, smaller cost products, there could be a significant portion of the audience that would drop off if they had to think about the purchase for more than 5 to 10 seconds, right? Like, I think there is some correlation there. I'm not saying there isn't. But like you're saying, Matt, there is a point in time, or there's a point in this like graph where the performance, sure, it can get better, but it's good enough that making it even faster almost guarantees nothing. Like there won't be any more benefit from making it faster, right? Like, you might get a single person a month to buy your product because of 1 second increase in loading speeds. Maybe. That's the reality that I think you as a developer have to pitch back, which is very difficult, because the other part of this is that politically, marketing usually has a lot of sway on corporate structure. So a lot of times you're going to be kind of fighting a losing battle, and you're going to have to just succumb to the fact that you're going to need to keep pushing your performance to be better at the detriment of everything else on the site sometimes. And it kind of sucks, because yes, performance matters, but it doesn't matter that much. What matters way more is what's on the site, what you're selling. If you're selling a product, that the use of that product, why people want it, matters way more. As long as they're able to check out at a reasonable amount of time, if they have to wait an extra second or two, there's no way that's going to stop them at the end of the day if they need the product. Like, it's just, I know that there's some studies out there that say that, or that have proven that to a certain degree, but I think those studies are a little bit swayed, and I think those studies targeting products that aren't, maybe, again, they're more like, damn it, I can't think of the word, but they're not essential products. A lot of times they're very much like drop ship heavy sites that are just like, hey, here's a quick, resell of a product. On those particular sites, maybe it matters more, but regardless, e-commerce is one thing. All the blog sites are another thing. You're going to be constantly fighting this battle. Make their performance better than their competitors. Show them that you're better than the competitors, or at or equal to the amount of their competitors, and be like, everything else is on you now. Sorry.
That right there is something that we've actually done, where I've gone in, and sometimes website pages are just heavy, like, due to the budget, due to the hosting, due to maybe the tools that are happening. You can't get the page speed insight scores to be higher. Maybe it's a limitation of the tools, maybe it's a limitation of the budget, whatever, or limitation in time. And you get it up to 65, but all the competitors are at 10 or 18 or 30 or things like that. I've absolutely taken pictures of the competitors' page speed insights and then taken a picture of ours and been like, look, we're 20, 30, 50, whatever points ahead of them. And people will appreciate that, because it's like, oh, okay, good. Because they, meaning that my client, was Googling for their competitors and found those pages through SEO. And if they're at 18 and we're at 65, I mean, that's pretty good, right? Like, we're like, clearly, like, our SEO is like, clearly it's going to work. And I do want to say one thing is that there's going to be, like, there's some companies that I've spoken to where their job is to do SEO stuff. And so they get caught up on everything SEO. Like, they'll get caught up on their performance. They get caught up on the titles. They get caught up on every little thing, the URL structure, everything. Totally understand that. And I'm not trying to, like, downplay that. Like, if that's your main job, yeah, you may get caught up on the performance of a website being, a second different, 0.2 seconds different. You may get caught up because that is part of your job. But as a small business owner, as someone who is helping people really architect solutions online, this is a low priority for me. I will not delay the launch of a site because the performance could be a slight bit better. It could always be a slight bit better. We could always do something a little different. What you're wasting time is especially if the site is unlaunched, is you need that page, that website, to get into Google. You need the search engines to start seeing it, reading it, understanding it. You need the search engines to start understanding that, hey, this is a site that's going to be updated with content. This is a site that's going to have new products, as Mike mentioned, with e-commerce. You need the search engines to find and start giving you data, because typically you'll have analytics tools, you'll have Google Search Console, things along that nature. And then now you have data, and it'll be like, oh, we should try for these these type of articles because we're ranking for these keywords, but we're not converting people into clicks. Things like that. That's real data. Sitting here just arguing over, and it is still real data. Load time is still real data. But sitting here arguing over, like Mike said, like, oh, but I'm missing out on one customer. It's like, yeah, but by you not putting this out, are you not missing out on 10? This is something that is definitely controversial that some of you in the audience, even right now, may completely disagree with. And again, I encourage you to ask and have the conversation with me, because like maybe I'm, a total fool, but I, again, have had success by not worrying about these little nitpick things, especially when there are other issues kicking around. I do have sites that load at 90 and, I don't know if I have any at 100 currently, but PageSpeed Insights and things like that. But it's just something to consider. It's just like if you're in the same situation as me last year when I kept getting pulled into these SEO meetings and pulled into this and pulled into that, and I have the same thing every time, and they always say, yeah, but we could be missing out on users. We could be missing out on users. I'm like, okay, well, how's that keyword research going? Well, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay, cool. So you're not going to do this huge thing, and you're going to pull me into 4 meetings about a small thing, right? Like that's not good. That's not how things. Like if I was running this site, this is not how I would run it. This is not the way to do it. And that's just from a professional perspective. That's not me just, getting upset that I'm getting pulled into meetings, although it was irritating. And just to kind of close this part off, I will say that, when it comes to images and media that users have uploaded, again, I will try to use that CMS. I'll try to say, this image can only be a megabyte. This video can only be 4 megabytes, whatever. This image can only be these resolutions. This image, like really kind of make those images and make those fields that they're going to be filling in on the CMS, make them almost like mistake proof. Try to make it so that the biggest mistake they can do is they can accidentally upload the wrong image, and that's on them. Try to have the system be like, hey, the image is too big. That's going to cause that will actually cause us SEO problems. Like get that out of here kind of thing. And have the site kind of like be a gatekeeper in that way. Have the CMS be a gatekeeper. And on larger sites, if I'm about to go launch, I will, go through, and if there's some big offenders, like if someone's done the 4K image at 18 megabytes and it's just going to show up in a little 300 pixel wide area, like I'll go fix those things. But I'm not going to delay a whole launch because, someone did 1080p compressed and WebP rather than 720p compressed and WebP. Like, okay, that's something on the list to go and address during polishing, but let's get this site out and let's get it into the hands of Google. My next thing on my list is link structure. So this is really important, especially, and it's possibly one of the first things that you're actually going to do if you're starting a site from scratch. So if you're starting a site from scratch, to me, having like a good logical URL structure makes a lot of sense, and I'll get into that. But most of us are going to be replacing old sites, renovating old sites, doing things like that. And this is really important. If you are replacing an old site, ensure the URLs of important pages, meaning the pages that bring in a lot of traffic, ensure that those URLs are preserved to maintain link equity. I have launched sites over top of old sites. So someone's made a site 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago even. I say, okay, this thing can't be renovated. It's got to be replaced. I make a new site. I ask, are there any pages that you care about? Person says no. Okay, so I make my own URL structure. I do everything. I put it all together. I publish it. They say the traffic's dropped. I go look at the old analytics data, and they didn't tell me, but their blog was generating a bunch of traffic, and the URL of my blog structure is completely different than theirs. So they just lost all that link equity. Now, yeah, you can regain some of that if you act quick with redirects and things like that. But this is a really important one for link structure. Absolutely make sure, because I've had this issue, like just straight up, I've had this issue. You need to make sure that the old link equity is kept, because if their whole website is running on, 200 users and one of their 200 users a month, and one of their blog posts is bringing in 100, that's 50% of the users. And I've seen that, absolutely, especially if it's a small business. Now, to me, if you have free reign over the URL structure, I personally like to have a URL structure that just makes sense. So something like, the main URL, and then it would be /blog and then /the blog post title. I don't like to have all my blog posts scattered all over the place. I know that some people don't care and there's like different reasons for that, but this is, again, just for me. This is how I like to structure it. And I like to make sure that the majority, if not all of my URLs are descriptive. I don't want to have like, the main domain slash like A20H2, blah, 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 all this garbage. To me, it's like, no, like slash blog slash how to do SEO, something like that. Like, boom, that's good. Google can read that. I can read that. I can find it. I can share it. It doesn't look foolish. It doesn't look machine generated. It looks nice. Boom, that's good. And that's, again, going back to that professionalism where it's like, hey, let's try to get things to be a little professional here. And that's the next thing here. This next part's gonna be a little neurotic, but I like to choose what version you want as the default. Now, I'm going to touch on canonical tags in a little bit, specifically a global canonical tag, and that touches on this. But I like to choose a version that I want as the default, specifically talking about www or non-www. And then have the marketing team be like, hey, don't be sharing. If we choose the www version, I don't want you sharing the non-www version. I don't want the person to have to be redirected. It's not a huge deal, but that's it. Take that out of your mind. Only share the version that we actually care about. Have the redirect, of course, because somebody might type it in and not. People aren't going to memorize whether you have www or not. But just to me, it's like, no, man, select that thing. Like, go in there and like select, like, everybody, we are using www, share those links as www. If your website uses subdomains, I'm a big fan of using them in a consistent way. So, for example, if it's something like you use subdomains for web apps that are highly related. So, for example, you have, let's just say and this is not a thing, but right now, but let's just say we have htmlallthethings.com. And let's say, as of recording, we don't have this, but let's just say we have a store that comes out eventually and it's a Shopify store. I may use store.htmlallthethings.com. That's, that's an easy, consistent thing to do, like easy, it makes sense. But I don't want to have a subdomain like that for something else. Like, I don't want to have blog.htmlallthethings.com. Like, I'm not a fan of that. There are some SEO penalties for subdomains. Make sure you do read up on those. But I know that some people will want to like kind of just use subdomains kind of all over the place. So sometimes you'll have htmlallthethings.com/blog. Sometimes you'll have blog.htmlallthethings.com. I'm not a fan of that. If we choose all separate web apps are going to have subdomains, then that's what we're going to use our subdomains for. If there's like a login portal specifically for our writers and you want to have like writerlogin.htmlallthethings.com and it takes you to like some other like login portal thing, that makes sense. But I don't want to have like, oh, we have a special episode. What we'll do is we'll have special episode.htmlallthethings.com. No, I want to have htmlallthethings.com/special episode. Again, this is more so my opinion on stuff. And yes, there is some SEO penalty for subdomains. So please research that before you start diving into subdomains. But I'm just a fan, personally, of keeping things consistent because you want to be able to easily know where things are in your site, especially when the site starts getting older, especially when the site is big, it's scaled up, things like that. I'm also, and this is no advice was given to me about this. This is just something I've come to the conclusion of. I am a firm believer in obvious and consistent link structure and link names. So specifically what I'm talking about is Google knows what a blog is. So htmlallthethings.com/blog makes sense. Now you don't need to do that. You can have /articles, you can have /read, things like that, and have your SEO title and your description and the things on the page define that it's a blog, and I'm sure Google will figure it out. But I'm a fan of talking to Google like it has a simple understanding of things. And I like to appeal to the most, I don't know if simple is the right word to say. It might be the most, I don't want Google to have to think much. I don't want Google to go, oh, is that a blog page? Let me look at that. Oh yeah, it is a blog page. I don't want them to question that. I want to go, oh yeah, it's a blog page. I want it to draw the right conclusion immediately. Because if we add more steps in the Google thinking process, which are useful, but if we add more steps when we don't have to, it's in my mind that there's a higher chance of your page being like kind of miscategorized, or it'll be like, like that's not their blog kind of thing. So that, and /contact, like I know that some people will have like /team and then all the contact is on there. That's great. I'm still a fan of having /contact and having a contact page, even if we link to the team page with everyone's stuff, or have a widget showing the team, like a lesser designed little widget on the contact page with all their contact information. I'm a fan of having those things because Google's not going to question, like, because what is /team? Well, it's showing the team members, but is there contact information on there? It's unclear, right? But having /team and then having /contact, like, oh, if I want to see if Mike works there, I'll go to /team. But if I want to call HTML of the things, or I want to message HTML of things, I'm going to go to /contact. Take that thinking step out. That's a personal thing. You may agree or disagree with that, but I'm a fan of that, and I've found success with it.
Yeah, I think like redirects are pretty important. So I just want to dive a little bit deeper into the differences between the different redirects and just making sure that you don't kind of screw up your link equity unknowingly. So a couple different scenarios that I've been a part of. One of them is like, let's say you have pages that have slugs as links. So the regular, blog post title as a link, or you have a page that has a slug and maybe also a way for an ID to resolve to that slug. So sometimes if you have a report page, that report might have a programmatically generated ID that needs to be shared with some other parts of the application. And to create a quick link between the two, you would just have a almost direct redirect from that report ID link to the slug link, right? So if you redirect it properly, no big deal. If you do a redirect, usually Google will figure out, okay, this is the page that it's meant to be. This is just a redirect, not an issue. If you accidentally host those pages separately and have them both display the same thing, which is possible, that would lead to some serious SEO problems, because now which one is the main page? Google can flag that. You're going to have some serious issues. So just make sure when you're doing some clever things with your redirects, you're not being too clever, you're following best practices. And so just quick overview on different types of redirects. There's two different types essentially. One is called a 301 redirect. This is a permanent redirect. So whenever you're trying to essentially immediately preserve link equity, like Matt was saying, when you're replacing an old site and trying to redirect to a new link, you would always use 301 redirects, because Google will see that and know that, okay, this is forever going to be at this place. We can transfer that link equity as much as we possibly can to this other place. You're good to go. So that's a good example of 301. 302 redirects. This is a temporary redirect. Now, the caveat here is that if a temporary redirect is around for a while, Google will actually be smart enough to realize that you probably screwed up and meant to put a 301, and will eventually transfer that link equity over. So the only real difference between the two is that it's not like an immediate transfer over. So initially Google sees that it's a 302 temporary redirect and leaves the link equity on the old page, thinking that, hey, maybe you're doing this temporarily. Maybe your site is down and your 302 to redirecting to a status page or something like that. So don't transfer that link equity. Or maybe you have an event that's going on right now that you're trying to push people to. So you're just trying to temporarily redirect them to a certain page so that they know what's going on. Whatever, Google assumes that it's a quick thing that you're going to revert back to. But if they come to your site after a couple of days and it's the same thing, usually they'll assume that it's a 301 and the same thing will happen. Those are kind of the only two caveats for different redirects.
Redirects are a great thing to mention, though, Mike, for the link structure, because a lot of programs, like a lot of no-code tools, CMS, a whole bunch of those type of tools will kind of throw around redirect a lot. Like if you go to change the slug of something, it'll be like, hey, do you want a 301 or 302 redirect? Do you want a redirect? And people are unsure. And so it's good, like absolutely something that will come up even if you're just a site editor and you're not really technical. And so totally makes sense to bring up, 301, 302, all that stuff. It's really important for SEO, and you can mess it up too. One thing that I will say is people will do, and they're supposed to, if a page has permanently moved, they'll do a 301, as Mike said, but then they will forget to set all the SEO stuff that they did on the new page. You got to make sure that page is ready for the redirect, because Google will be like, oh yeah, it's a redirect. Cool. I'll pass on the link equity. Well, that page is crap now, so I'm going to sync that SEO. Well, of course, right? Because if the page was crap before, it would have got that bad ranking anyway. So make sure your page is ready for that redirect. Now, content is something else that, is big. I mentioned content, websites, things like that. I don't want to get bogged down in this because content is something that I feel like we could have one or heck, even several episodes about, honestly. But I do want to talk about it briefly. This is just sort of, again, my SEO checklist, things that I look for. Big one that seems simple, but big one is I ensure my heading structure. I like to have there only be one H1. So if you don't know, headings are made with, HTML tags, H1s through H6s. So there's 6 headings there. Generally speaking, I like to have my H1, which is sort of my biggest and most important. I shouldn't say biggest. When I say biggest, people are always like, it's the font size. That's not necessarily true because you can set the font size to whatever you want. H1 through H6 should be about importance. So it should be about importance and organization. So H1 is the most important, H6 is the least important, and you can have like sub headings. So for example, you can have H2. So let's just say you have your H2 and it's like, how do I plant things? Your H3 underneath it might be like, buy some dirt. The next H3 might be like, buy a shovel. So now those are like subheadings underneath that H2. And then you can go back out and be like, how do I like plant azaleas specifically? Like that's another topic. That's another level of importance. It's really important that you get that correct because Google sees the H1 through the H6, does not generally, as far as I know, care about the font size. It cares about that important structure. What's important on this page? And not having your H1 reflect what you have as your SEO title in any way is a surefire way for Google to go, that is an SEO, like someone's trying to, get one over on us using that SEO title. I think we should use this H1 instead. That's really common. So make sure your headings are like super nice. Make sure they're all structured. I structure my tutorials with these. I'll put like step 1, step 2, step 3 in headings sometimes. And Google and AI bots seem to love that. They see it. They go, oh yeah, perfect. How do you make an image a link in Webflow is the H2. H3 is step 1. Another H3 is step 2. Another H3 is step 3. And they seem to grab that and pull that into their snippets, pull that into their summaries, things like that. I don't know how popular that article was, but I know that my make images into links in Webflow article was really, really popular for a while. And during the early days of SEO, like that, not SEO of AI, it always pulled those in, and it always pulled in. If you asked that question, it would always pull my steps in exactly how I structured it. So that structure is really, really important. I also check for articles that are too short and maybe seen as clickbait. If the articles are just like real quick, like half a paragraph, it may be seen as clickbait and it likely won't rank. Now, sometimes you don't need a big article. I'm not saying that you write something that's just nonsense, certainly. Maybe you have a short article because you're going to share that link around on Facebook because it's just for an event and the event's self-explanatory. Fair enough, right? Maybe some stuff you don't need to have SEO to the 9. A couple of personal notes on this topic though, and one thing is that make it easy for your clients and yourself to add and edit content. Many clients don't even really want to make content. Depending on the website, if they're writing a content site, that's a different story. But if they're trying to advertise their business, which is doing something else, they want to focus on their main business activities. If you make it easy to add, edit, remove, modify, blah, blah, blah content, that barrier to entry is lowered and there's a higher chance of them actually using the thing. Also, I've been asked to create SEO plans. And when you kind of take a zoom out and you go, okay, what would be amazing for this website in 2 years, 3 years, whatever? What would be amazing? Well, if you had 100 blog posts, that'd be fantastic. You bring that to a person who's trying to focus on their main business activities, which are not on the web, they're going to go, whoa, and they're not going to do it. So I like to create SEO plans that will say, we should have 100 blog posts. Let's not do that right away. And I'll literally say that. Let's do 10 right now. Let's do 10 over the next few months. Maybe hire some people to write some for you. Get AI to help you. You write it. Maybe you hire me to write a couple. Let's get 10 blog posts out over the next 10 over the next few months. And then we'll take a look at the analytics and we'll see what are you ranking for, what people actually want to see from you, things like that. And then our next 10 or our next 15 will be even better. And then our next 10 will be even better. Things like that. Just digestible little pieces. And I still let them know about the 100 because I still want them to know, hey, we're working toward objective here. Like this isn't, I'm not saying you should have 10 million blog posts and you should be writing blog posts forever. I'm saying that I think about 100 should be good. Let's do that in a reasonable way in a few years. Let's not do that, tomorrow night, because that's crazy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that content can be centered around. It depends on what you're trying to do. And I think focusing on content almost over anything else is probably going to be your best bet to success with SEO. If you're a business that's trying to push, I don't know, a certain type of tool, like maybe a developer tool, like something to bring it into our space, I think one of the more important things is to figure out what your audience wants to read about, what the fringe of your audience, like how to bring in the funnel, and then plan out the content based on the keywords, the questions that people ask. I think this is a really important one. And one that I use on a very consistent basis is I go onto Google and I'll start typing in something around the topic that I want to talk about. So for instance, if I want to write an article about TypeScript, I'll start typing what TypeScript, and then I'll see what Google will start autofilling. And those are cool indicators for you to understand what people are searching for on a day-to-day basis. And you can do that with more specific, less specific. You can do that there's different methods of doing that. There's the, TypeScript space A, TypeScript space B, to see different types of questions that people are asking. But focusing on what people are searching for making the SEO plan for content is a successful strategy, right? Is a way for you to get eyeballs, because how are people going to find your stuff? Well, they're probably going to search for it. How do you tailor your stuff to the searches? Know what they're searching for. Answer those questions directly with the proper use of H tags as the question. A lot of times the question will actually be an H3 for me. And then under that, I'll write the answer. And with that, Google can actually grab that whole block and put it onto their top part of the section, part of the page, and have a link to your site right at the top. So if you answer direct questions that aren't commonly answered, especially, that can be a huge boost in traffic for you, right? So this is really important. I do want to have a little bit of a caveat here where when it comes to AI, we can't have an episode where we don't talk about AI, but AI is changing things right now in terms of SEO. There's now AI-driven SEO, right? Writing articles that are easier for AI to pick up. There's ways to get into these LLM systems now. There's ways to really target AI, because the reality is people are still using Google a ton. Google itself has implemented AI at the top of the search results, so that's already there. But the shift to using an LLM for answering questions is happening more rapidly. So content has to be shifted towards that. But the other part of it is there might come a time when SEO marketing in the traditional sense might not work the way it works right now. So you need to be ready for that transition in some way, shape, or form. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I think if you're a marketing agency, if you're looking to get into freelancing, this is something you need to really pay attention to, because at some point there's going to be this, not a switch, it's going to happen probably gradually, but you'll see that traffic is significantly going down to certain websites. And you'll notice that there's just a different way to get eyeballs onto whatever product you're trying to do, and you're going to have to adapt to whatever that way is. The only way to do that, be really, really plugged into the system.
Yeah, and SEO is serious. There's technical SEO, and it's one piece of the puzzle. A lot of people will kind of lean on that, and that's not the case. Mike's 100% correct. If people are, well, I just have I have an actual example. So I have a client who really wants to show up on Google Discover and Google News feeds, not Google News the app, but Google News feeds. Kind of those feeds that are kind of in the Google app randomly. Sometimes it's the leftmost screen on some Android phones, things like that, called Discover feed, things along those lines. And he wants to show up there. And so in Google Analytics, it shows him as, it's Google Analytics or Google Search Console. I think it's Google Analytics. It'll tell him like, oh, like this is like where you've shown up in Discover. And he shows up like 2 times a year, 3 times a year. And I went and looked at Discover and I said, you have to write articles of this type, like listicles, things like that at the time were really hot on there. I haven't checked on it in a while. And he was like, well, I don't really want to do that. It's like, cool, man. You don't own, and neither do I own these like random Google feeds, these Discover feeds, these news feeds, these this and that. And I said, even in the Google News app, even in the Google News tab on the search engine, you need to adhere to what they're asking for. And you need to be plugged in, like Mike said, to the system. If listicles are doing great, then do some listicles. Listicles are doing bad, what is doing good? Our feature articles doing well. Like if there's an influencer in that industry that you're writing about, and or like little biographies doing well or interviews doing well, what's doing well? But it's hard to sell a client on that because they'll be like, well, I don't really want that on my site. And it's like, well, then Google doesn't really want you on their site. It's one of those things where you need to be plugged into the system because we are not the end all be all. SEO is trying to get onto someone else's platform in one way or another. Now, I have a list here of what I call nitpicks. Now, these things are not necessarily easy to set up. Nothing like that. That's not what I'm saying. Nitpicks as in I go in here and I've set these things up in certain ways so many times that I basically go in here and make sure they're set and I walk away. Some of these things are complex. Some of these things are not. I'm going to go through the list. First one here is a sitemap. Basically, I just make sure that all the appropriate pages are allowed or disallowed for Google bots and things like that. I have like a boilerplate that I'll use. Basically, I make sure that the sitemap is there to begin with. Make sure all the appropriate pages are allowed and disallowed, and I kind of walk away. I know that some people will get really into the sitemap and like mess around with that and the link structure and all these other things. But again, I gotta have a boilerplate because I've been around the block a couple times. So like, I'm just like sitemap, copy, paste, boom, hooray. Oh, you need a little modification? Sure, do that. No big deal. Analytics, another thing. You could have several episodes on this. I'm not going to bore you with it. This is also very subjective. Some people want analytics right away. Some people want analytics months down the line. Some people want in-depth information. Some people want just page views. I like to get, my Google Analytics or my other analytics set up as early as possible. Let it cook, more or less. Like, I want to see like what happened when my site finally hit Google. What happened later on? Did it skyrocket then dip? Give me as much information as possible. But this is very subjective, very opinionated. Like, hey, I don't want to use Google Analytics. I want to use an alternative. So this is going to vary for you. It's also going to vary for your clients. But for me, again, I have a boilerplate. Here's an account, Google Analytics. Here's the access. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. I mentioned this earlier, global canonical tag. So this is a canonical tag that is global across the website. Basically, it doesn't just always post to one site. So I'll give an example. So if, let's say, for example, I write an article, write a blog post, a guide on, just say a Webflow guide, just for the sake of making it easy. It's a Webflow guide. I write a Webflow guide up and I decide that I'm going to repost this on Medium and I'm going to repost this on, let's just say Medium for the sake of simplicity. Well, it was originally posted and I want the actual SEO to go to my site, to HTML all the things. So on Medium, I'll copy paste my article and then I'll go in and I'll set the canonical tag to that one page on htmlallthethings.com, the page that houses the story. Global canonical tag is to help you sort out what is the canonical version of the URL. So commonly it will say, which one do you want? Do you want the www or the non-www version of the website? And then that will go on each page. And the global canonical tag is on each page, but it includes the whole link. So for example, some websites, let's just say it's htmlallthethings.com. This is not how it works on our site, but just for the sake of example, let's just say you want to go to htmlallthethings.com/blog. And let's say it does not redirect anywhere. So it just takes you to htmlallthethings.com/blog. But then there's also www.htmlallthethings.com/blog. If you don't want them to redirect for some reason, 99% of the time you would. But if you don't for some reason, you can have this global canonical tag in there that just says like, hey, we want the www version to be the one that's like canonical. And it kind of just helps Google to be like, hey, like, should I be indexing www and non-www as two separate things? It's just a little bit of a push like, hey, no, this is kind of getting everyone on the same page. 99% of the time, you're going to have one of the versions. Like if you choose www, the non-www version is just going to redirect to the www version. The global canonical tag, it's just a little touch. It's just something that just says, hey, everyone on the same page. Just like how I said earlier with the marketing team, where I was like, everyone share the correct version of the link. It's a nitpick, but make sure you do that. This is one of those nitpicks. Just a little bit of organization, just a little bit of massaging, keep things on the same page. Icons, things like the favicon, things like setting the proper, like a web clip icon, things like that for when people save the website or save the PWA, let's say, to their phone screens, to their computer screens, or their computer like desktops, things like that. Make sure you have a nice icon set. If you don't have those ready right away, it's not not the end of the world, but it is one of those things where it's like you look professional if you got all your icons and all your ducks in a row. So in my checklist, I definitely go, hey, we need these icons done. Even if we just have one that's like professional, but not the one we want, if we're still trying to like deal with the artist and kind of like figure out what we want exactly, let's have something there that looks half decent, it looks professional, because then, kind of crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. And that's it for me. Mike, you have something important to mention, though, that I didn't mention at all in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that kind of we ran into recently is HTTPS. Apparently, I mean, this seems kind of obvious, but looking back on it, but apparently SEO checkers will constantly flag if you have any links, including images, image sources that don't have HTTPS. So sometimes an image source will give you a default image with HTTP because, it's an image, who cares? But the reality is that immediately is flagged as insecure and can lead to a detrimental SEO score. Now, how much that actually impacts your SEO probably is subjective and different across every different platform. But this is an easy one that you can just make sure, hey, just put an S here instead of an HTTP. You can have a rule in your app to just check for all HTTP URLs and flag them as errors in like an ESLint config. There's plenty of different ways to handle this one, but just an easy one you can tackle. Definitely a nitpick. Nothing that's going to transcend your website into anything, but just something I wanted to mention.
Well, it's something I was just actually looking as you were talking. It's something also that, just mentioning that global canonical tag as well, meaning having just to be clear, having a global canonical tag is having a canonical tag on each of your pages. Your canonical href will actually have the HTTP or HTTPS. And so this is, again, one of those things that Mike is saying, where it's like everything's just kind of like getting your ducks in a row, right? Where it's like, if you don't redirect from HTTP to HTTPS, Google could get confused. Google could be like, hey, what the heck's going on here? And you're right, Mike. Like 99% of the time, Google's will be like, I'm going to choose the secure one, right? And it's just going to make that hard decision. But we are talking to a bot, and the bot asks itself questions and comes to its own conclusions. Do you trust every single one of those? They're really, really fantastic. It's really handy having a bot help you out, 100%. But, it is, you want to make it as simple for the bot as possible. HTTPS, and you only want HTTPS, which 99% of the time you do, then make it so that only HTTPS loads. Mike's 100% correct. Make sure that your canonical shows that HTTPS in there. You don't want HTTP and then it's all confused and no one knows what's going on. Make it so that the bot, the Google bot, the crawlers don't have to ask the question. They go, yep, I know what that is. That's a blog. That's the secure link to the blog even. And I know what that is. And it's the www version, or it's the non-www version, etc. But I think that's it. I've rambled, talked, cried, laughed through this episode of SEO and my SEO checklist. Again, I've had success with this. I don't have any sites that are like 2 million users, but I've also don't have any sites that people are really complaining about too much. So like I've definitely helped people grow by using these tips. And I didn't go into absolutely everything that you do, because otherwise we'd be talking for the next 2 hours, especially since I can and do help clients with content, which I only touched on in this episode. But I hope this episode helps you out. I hope this episode can, kind of help your general SEO skills. You can kind of look into things and be like, man, what should I do for my sitemap? Do I need HTTPS for this? What do I need for this? What do I need for that? Do I need a 301 here, a 302? Things of that nature. Mike, do you have anything else to add before we run the old conclusion?
No, I think we're good. Runner up.
Well, remember that we are on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML, all the things. Check out the tiers and give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review. Wait, hold up. We also have to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.